All right, let's start our next chapter. And this set of notes is actually before our unit. We're going to call this pre-unit 5, writing and using inverses. So solving equations, why do I have to show my work? I will hear that many, many times this chapter, believe me. So let's look at this. This problem's easy. Okay, x plus 5 equals 12. You know x has to be 7 because 7 plus 5 gives you 12. But things get harder when we mix in negatives. The answer isn't 7 anymore. It's negative 7 because negative 7 minus 5 gives you negative 12. And this one's even harder. Most students think the answer is 7 or negative 7, but it's not either of those. It's negative 17. X minus negative 5 is equal to x plus 5, and negative 17 plus 5 gives you negative 12. Or maybe we'll throw in fractions and or parentheses like this. Or this. And remember, the answer doesn't always have to be an integer. It could be a fraction or decimal. And those solutions aren't easy to figure out mentally. And sometimes we have questions that involve more than one variable like this. All right, so let's talk about the inverse. The inverse is the opposite of what is happening. So an inverse operation is different in only one way from the original. So example 1, the inverse of subtracting by negative 28 is adding by 28. Example number 2, the inverse of adding by 17 is subtracting by 17. And example number 3, the inverse of adding by 13 is adding by negative 13. So note, with addition and subtraction, you can change either the sign on the number or the operation. Therefore, every statement will have two possible inverses. So let's look at with addition and subtraction. One change makes an inverse. Two changes keeps the meaning the same. Why? Because subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So let's look at these here. Inverse or the same. So number 1, we have subtracting by 27, adding by negative 27. That would be the same. And number 2, subtracting by negative 55 and adding by 55. That's also the same. All right, look at number 3. Subtracting by 31 and adding by 31 is an inverse. Subtracting by negative 16 and adding by negative 16 is the inverse. And you can go through the rest of these here and look at that. And then you can try numbers 1 through 6 there if you want to for some extra practice, writing inverse or the same. All right, so writing the inverse to solve equations then. The addition property of equality, if you add the same number to each side of an equation, the two sides remain the same. The subtraction property of equality, if you subtract the same number from each side of an equation, the two sides remain the same. So what's happening to the variable? You're going to see that a lot. What's happening to the variable? All right, so right now in this number 16, what's happening to the variable right now is it's subtracting by 8. So the inverse would be to add by 8. So what's happening in number 17 to the inverse? Well, we're adding by 16. So the inverse would be to subtract 16. In number 18, what's happening to the variable? We're adding a negative 12. So the inverse would be to subtract a negative 12. Okay, so you can try those for some extra practice as well. And there's an independent practice there too if you want to.